Evening, Hempfield. This is Pastor Doug with Hempfield Church of the Brethren. We are coming from the sanctuary tonight. We'll be looking at John 13 then. If you stop in, comment, say hello. If you feel up to it, let me know. If you had all the power in the world right now, what would you do? A couple comments. We'll look at John 13 tonight. We're going to look at John 13. Sunday is World Communion Sunday. We will not be having communion this Sunday, but I'm going to contact the deacons and see if there's a creative way that we can do communion here in the next coming weeks. Just to let you know that. This has been a time of creativity and of people using their gifts, sometimes in new ways. Sometimes we're not able to use our gifts as much as we'd like, or we need to use them in a different way. That's okay. God is still moving through His people, still strengthening the body, and it's exciting to see the new ways that people are stepping into to glorify Christ and to strengthen His body. You know, something came up a couple times last week. Do you know trees need wind to grow? They need wind to grow strong. There was something evidently called the biosphere too, and they grew these trees in there, but they realized after they got so tall they would fall over. And they learned that trees need wind to strengthen something in the growing process. And that just struck me because then, so I came across this fact last week, and then someone came to me and they said they're reading Billy Graham's daughter's devotional, and I can't think of her name at the minute. I apologize. But she said how they would travel to a place in North Carolina or Tennessee on family vacations, and these trees at the top of the mountain they would climb were huge, and they could barely get their arms around them. And it just struck me, at the top of the mountain, I bet there's a lot of wind up there, and I wonder if there's any correlation with the amount of wind and resistance that the tree needs to stand against and the thickness of its trunk. It struck me as funny that both of these things were brought up within a couple days of each other. I wanted to share it. Resistance trials seem to help us grow. And in this time, the Church of God will grow. And the things that are not of Christ will most likely be confronted and die. This scares some people, especially for a lot of us who have been comfortable for so many years. I'm excited. I'm excited about it because I can't wait to see how the glory of Christ is revealed in and of this time. Time and time again throughout the Bible, He either starts with a small group or whittles down to a small group. God does this in the Old Testament. Christ does this in the New Testament, of course. He pours into 12 people, 3 specifically. He had thousands follow Him and thousands turn away, and He didn't trust the crowds because, you know, crowds can do what crowds can do. They'll sway on a moment's notice sometimes. Good evening, Bushongs. So I'm excited about this time because all the things and all the ways that we may have made it about us will be confronted, and we can turn that energy and make it about Christ. So, it's exciting. James 1 says, "Rejoice when you face trials of many kinds, knowing that the testing of your faith produces perseverance." And that word for perseverance in the Greek, it means to leave a mark. Much like this scar right here, left a mark on my chin. It leaves a mark, because then when you go through a trial the next time, you'll remember how God moved the previous time. And that builds perseverance, that builds faith, that builds trust, and that what God says He will follow through with. What He says will come to pass. And man, I'm excited. So in this time where we're looking at World Communion Sunday, and we're in an election season, I'm not sure if you're aware of that or not, I wanted us to look at our King. I wanted us to look at Christ and Christ's kingdom. Because I think it's important for us to decipher what's of Jesus and what's of our culture. So, when we think about the kingdom of God, how will it enter in? What will it look like? How will it come? I've been thinking about this more and more. And reading through John, there were a couple things that stood out to me. After feeding the 5,000, they tried to take Jesus by force and make him their king. And he slipped away. He went out into nature. One of the temptations, I was talking to another minister, Ryan, brought about this, and he's going to expound on it more with Veritas in Lancaster on Sunday, so you can check them out as well. One of the temptations, Satan shows Jesus all the kingdoms of the earth, and he said, "I can give you these in all their glory if you just bow down and worship me." And Jesus turned him down. And even when he's sitting before Pilate, he says to him, "If my kingdom were of this world," this is in John 18:36. Jesus says, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then my servants would be fighting so that I would not be handed over. But as it is, my kingdom is not of this realm." I read through John a few weeks ago, and this is one of the passages that stood out to me. And I wonder how many of people who follow Christ are fighting over this world right now to try to bring His kingdom in through another way than He laid out. So we look at John 13. And in John 13, in the first couple verses, it says, "Now before the feast of the Passover, Jesus, knowing that His hour had come, that He would depart out of this world to the Father, having loved His own who were in the world, He loved them to the end. During supper, the devil, having already put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon, to betray Him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into His hands, and that He had come forth from God and was going back to God, got up from supper and laid aside His garments, and taking a towel, He girded Himself." So, the way the NIV words this, it says, "Jesus, knowing that the Father had given Him all power." Father had given Jesus all power. Good evening, Janice. And what did He do with that power? I mean, what would you do if you were given all the power in the world? Hello, bandits. You know, I think if we were given all the power in the world, we'd have these idealistic things of what we would do. but would we follow through? So at this time in the world, there were about 230 million people on earth, give or take 75 million. I looked this up. It was on Business Insider, I believe. So let's say 160 to 320 million people on earth. And there were some awful things going on at this time. I mean, in Rome they had the gladiators, where men would fight one another and they'd fight animals, and they'd often die with spectators cheering on their deaths. They had the chariot races, where oftentimes horses and or the charioteers, the men the pilots who would be driving these, someone would die within these races, and they would cheer in these stadiums. According to the same article in the Business Insider, the mortality rate, 75% of the kids who were born lived, and then half of them died before the age of 10. I mean, there were a lot of bad things going on. I mean, we're not even getting into the temple, some of the pagan temple practices and the abuses that happened there. So Jesus had all this power, and all these things were going on in the world, and he had all this power. And something struck me from the chapter before, in chapter 12. It says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. He who loves his life loses it, and he who hates his life in this world will keep it to life eternal. If anyone serves me, he must follow me, and where I am, there my servant will be also. If anyone serves me, the Father will honor him." So, he talks about a seed, and we know how small a seed is and how great a harvest can come from that seed. But he talks about a seed dying. So he's sitting at the table in chapter 13 with his 12 disciples as we know them. He's sitting there with Simon the Zealot, who would fight tooth and nail to kick Rome out and reestablish Israel, to kick out the oppression that was there. And he's eating dinner with Matthew the tax collector, who collected taxes for that very government. Jesus is eating dinner with a fisherman who would end up denying him. He's having dinner with the money handler, Judas, who would betray him that very night. He's having dinner with Thomas, the one who would question and doubt, and the others who would scatter when he was arrested and crucified. And in this dinner, all power and authority were given to him. And what did he do? He knelt down and he began to wash his disciples' feet. He took the form of a servant or a slave, not a rabbi. And I can imagine if someone was seeing this from the outside, they would be judging Jesus, because no rabbi, no teacher would bow down, would stoop down and do that. And yet that's what he did. He didn't try to bring the kingdom in by force, because it was contradictory. Even when Peter cut off the guard's ear, he rebukes him and says, "Don't you know that I can call legions of angels? But put your sword away so that the scriptures may be fulfilled." All power and authority are given to Jesus. And when he washed his disciples' feet, was that power and authority removed? No. And this is the thing. We have this view of power and authority in our culture that we think that it's there's only so much. It's scarce. And if I give up my power and authority, if I give up my position, then someone else will have it. And I will no longer have that authority. I don't think that's how it is in Christ's kingdom. And that's the thing, that's the king I want to serve. I want to serve the king who models what he wants to see in his believers. So he tells them, unless a grain of wheat falls and dies, it can only produce, it can't reap, it can't have a harvest. Only when it falls to the ground and dies can it have a harvest. And this would have happened on a Thursday night. And Judas betrays him. And on Friday they crucify him. After Peter denies him. After they scatter back to their homes. Because now they're scared. Saturday was a dark, confusing, frustrating day. And even Sunday morning, they still didn't get it. Not until Jesus fully revealed himself. And they thought he was the gardener. And then they knew. It didn't matter what they faced. Prison, beatings, excommunication from former colleagues, threats. Most of them would end up facing their own deaths to proclaim the gospel of their King, Jesus Christ, to allow other people to be set free. And then nothing could stop them. And what should have died with Jesus that day on the cross grew into this world-changing, world-shifting movement. So, which king are you going to follow? Which king do you want to emulate? Who do you want to serve? I don't know if you can see behind me, but there's a bucket and a towel back there. It's to help us remember the king we follow. The king who knelt down and washed his disciples' feet. I pray that no matter what goes on in this world, all of the craziness, all of the fighting, all of the tension, that we may remember the king that we serve, and that his foundation is solid. World powers will rise and fall, but the kingdom of Christ remains. And whether we're in prison, whether we're on house arrest, whether we're wearing masks or no masks, we are free to proclaim the gospel of Christ, which has been passed down to us generation after generation after generation. That the gospel message is unbound. That's a beautiful thing. And this is where we receive our peace. This is where we receive our hope. This is where we receive our grace and mercy. Don't be distracted by the masses. Stand with Christ your King. Kneel down with him. Wash other people's feet. And allow his kingdom to come. I look forward to seeing how Christ will use our brothers and sisters here. I look forward to seeing how Christ will use the brothers and sisters in our community. And I want you to know we have nothing to fear. The buildings can be destroyed. The land can be taken away. The church will always stand because it remains with the people. May you be blessed tonight. May you know Christ and him crucified. And may you join us in serving one another and serving our community. God bless you.